Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast that's about to deep dive into our journeys throughout the lands between. I'm your host for this episode, Jordan Rudek, and it's finally time to get into the weeds of Elden Ring to share all of our favorite places, experiences, and of course, failures. Joining me tonight is a man who is now refusing to play any RPG where he can't use magic. It's David Lloyd.
I'm definitely refusing to play any game made by FromSoftware that doesn't allow me to use magic. I've learned my lesson too many times with this franchise or this company, and there's a direct correlation between the games that let me use magic and my enjoyment of said games.
There's always pyromancy in some of the earlier Dark Souls games, or maybe you could even go. I know you're not a stranger to using like a crossbow or a bow and arrow. You know, like there's probably some builds you could try out there. I've never really done it, but you could probably go look into it, I guess. I
definitely like being far away from opponents and blasting them without any regard. That's my preferred way of playing any RPG these days.
Yeah, and then you try to do that, and then Miyazaki throws a giant bear at you, so it doesn't always work out.
I was quite perturbed when the giant bear spawned from thin air. I didn't even know that was something that could happen. But
I didn't even realize there's a giant bear. There's a giant bear boss that I never even ran into. I was just dying to the regular bears, let alone like an actual boss. But yeah, they're pretty tough. Joining us also is someone who's celebrating the 5-year anniversary of their YouTube channel, and that's Alex from Backlog Battle.
Hey guys, I figure after like our talk about Tales of Arise, I'd come back to talk about yet another Bandai Namco game. What's going on here? There's like a pattern happening right now. I
think you've established it, Alex, and now I think going forward, anytime there's a big Bandai Namco release, we're gonna have you on to talk about it, at least for one episode, maybe more. The funny thing is, this is our kind of second or third episode kind of talking about Elden Ring. Obviously, this is more of the deep dive, nitty gritty. I think there's going to be spoilers here. We're not going to go like we're not going to go like Vadi Vidya and just like spoil everything in the story. But we're definitely going to be looking at things a little bit more closely and talking about middle and end part of the game. So good for everyone to know that kind of going in. But obviously, we're thrilled to have Alex back. So 5-year anniversary of your YouTube channel, Alex, that's pretty cool. I wanted to ask or kind of talk about how you're marking that anniversary. What are you doing to celebrate? And I know it's kind of another reason why you wanted to hop on this episode with us too.
Yeah. So basically like the channel has been all about JRPGs and finding like hidden gems and games and stuff. And, fairly recently, obviously, like because Elden Ring is so big, like I started covering that. And it kind of gave me the idea that like, what the channel really is all about isn't just JRPGs. It's really like all manner of RPGs, much like, this podcast and stuff. And so in a way, like in its 5th anniversary, we're going to just cast a wider net. We're still going to talk about Japanese games because I love JRPGs and Japanese games. But now, with the lens that we want more people to get into this genre and other genres in general. I think really like playing Elden Ring has kind of like made me, really get that passion back for helping others who may dabble in the more mainstream games kind of discover a whole new world that they're probably missing out on just by staying or sticking to one genre. And so that's really like kind of like the big change that's happening. But for the most part, if you go to the channel, what's going to happen is you're going to see like a brand new logo. It's going to be much more in tune with like, like RPGs and stuff. It's, I even added like a fancy like HPMP meter there, but not like others, and just a whole bunch of like really cool like production stuff that, just ups the quality of the channel's videos even further. So basically like you'll never believe rather that all of this was made by one dude, but here I am like doing everything like graphics, logos, and it's just nuts. And I think it's going to be a blast just talking about games and kind of getting to know the community more. And that's really like how I'm planning to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the channel, is to get really in tune with the community and what they like and create more conversations around that.
I think that's awesome. I think we're talking about a game genre that can be intimidating to folks. Like if you didn't grow up playing RPGs, it can be harder later in life to get into them, right? Because you read about 20, 30, 40, 50 hour games and it's like, oh, I don't have time for that, or it just seems like starting with something like that as opposed to something smaller or something more approachable is difficult, right? So I think what you're doing there, I think that project, that task is a worthwhile one for sure. I know, kind of on the Thirsty Mage, and David I think will agree and can add on to this. But I think we're trying to do that as well too, especially lately. Is think about smaller experiences or maybe things that are RPG adjacent that can help get people into this genre that we know and love.
Yeah. Jordan, the secret, though, is that people are already spending that amount of time on other games.
It's true. Good point.
Think about how many hours people spend on Valorant and Apex Legends. It's probably in the couple of hundreds at this point. It's just that people are afraid to go back and actually tabulate how long they've been doing that. Or rather, the game refuses to outright tell you how long you've been playing so you can play more.
That's right. Yeah, they don't want to scare you off, right? I guess a funny story for me about learning about how long I'd played a game. When I finally went to this website that tracks how many hours, I guess, or how many games you've played of League of Legends, the online MOBA game. When I saw that number and I calculated how many days of my life I had played League of Legends, that was kind of like a breaking point for me. Or I'm like, I have to stop. I've just spent so many hours, yes, enjoying my time, but also there's so many other games out there that I want to get to. So I can understand why some other games that obfuscate that information are going to keep it hidden. But you're absolutely right. And it's funny about some of those games you mentioned. Valorant, Call of Duty. These games also seem to have RPG elements added to them now, especially so that there's that melding that's happening anyways.
Yeah, for sure. But of course, we're here to talk about probably the biggest game of the year, which is Elden Ring. This is insane. I've never been so obsessed about a game in such a long time than this one, and I can't wait to talk about it.
I've been thinking about this game ever since it was first announced. I was thinking about it, and the lead up to the launch, I was just so excited about it. It was already my most hyped game. I know I mentioned that on a earlier episode of the podcast when we were talking about most anticipated 2022 games. I thought there's no way it could be anything other than Elden Ring, and for it to just deliver. And I've been watching videos, including your video, Alex, which we can talk maybe a little bit more later. A fantastic video, by the way. Everyone needs to check that out on Backlog Battle. But just watching Elden Ring now, rather than participating in the game, playing the game, which I feel like I need to take that break until maybe some new content comes out, or I just kind of feel that itch. But I'm in that stage where I'm just consuming other people's content about the game, and it's just continuously reminding me of just how special and unique this game is. I want to hear from David, because David's only recently got into Elden Ring, and we're going to talk about our favorite places and things. But David, just some of your maybe more extended impressions now that you've put a number of hours into the game.
Yeah, well, I definitely would. I'm only playing this game because of the the podcast and the community we have here. If you guys were playing it, I certainly would not have picked it up myself. That's even part of the whole reason behind my delay into getting it was, I'm kind of scared off of. I really enjoyed Demon Souls on PS5. I went through that and had a great time. Got to the end, but then I got my butt handed to me in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and I got into Dark Souls a little bit more, but Bloodborne was that was the slog for me. And so, it's one of those I don't know. And then seeing how much everybody was enjoying it. It's funny that you mentioned Alex's video, because I kind of had, watching it, there's the 30-minute video is kind of on the game and how Alex describes getting into the game as well. And it's kind of very mimics my own, where it's I'm very apprehensive about playing a FromSoftware game. But after getting into it, it feels different. It's not your kind of standard one. It's evolved. It does so many different things that it's more, I don't know if it's purposefully more accessible or just accidentally more accessible. But it's got so many things baked into it that you can really enjoy it. I think one of the reasons why I'm enjoying it so much now is it reminds me so much of Skyrim in the same kind of, massive world and, full of content. You could just be walking down a path and hey, there's a cave. What's in the cave? And then there's all these things in the cave. And then you clear it and you leave and you take your loot and you have some fun. Obviously, the biggest difference between the two is there's certainly no chatty chat in in Elden Ring, where Skyrim is a very story heavy game. But yeah, I've put I've had about a week now, and I've been playing it nonstop. Even talking with you and telling you where I've gone, and you being surprised that you've only been there a week and you're like running everywhere. I was trying to go up mountains and go, I was clearly in places I shouldn't have been, but that's part of the experience.
My impression was that you weren't spending a lot of time in one area, but instead, maybe hopping on your horse and just seeing as much of the world as you can. Something that's great about this game is the fact that you can kind of pick up maps for every area that you go into, and I think that becomes like a really meaningful or enjoyable part of the game, is kind of seeing that little signpost on the map as you clear out kind of like the darkened version of it, and then you find out where the map is going to be located, where you can actually pick it up and then kind of just beelining it to that section, picking up the map, and then seeing how it colors in and seeing how everything opens up. Right, it's pretty satisfying just to open up this map and see everything. And of course, we've played other games like this before, like something like Breath of the Wild, where you go to the kind of the larger towers, and the towers open up a part of the map. And there's something that's really satisfying about that in open world games is the way that the world itself opens up to your view, or your perspective can change after you've kind of spent some time or collected some documents or just explored a little bit more. That's always pretty satisfying.
I've definitely done a lot of accidental exploration as well, because there's things where I was looking at it and I'm like, I probably shouldn't touch this, but I'm going to touch it anyway. And then I end up in a total spot where I shouldn't have gone. The funniest one was there was, can't remember what it was called. I meant to look up it on the map first, but there's this church with one of the sites of grace, and I saw a cliff and I wanted to go up the cliff. So I walked over to this kind of watery area right below the cliff to see if there was anywhere to get up. And I noticed this, clearly it was a warp. It's this, ring, and there was kind of this magical thing going on in the middle. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, I know this is going to warp me somewhere.
It's like a portal. They look like portals. They're kind of drawing you in. Right?
Clearly this is a portal. And it's and then it even asks, you sure you want to touch this? And yes. I'm like, yeah, I want to touch this. And it dropped me off in at the front step of, I think it's the Bestial Chapel or something, way off in the thing. And I'm standing behind this tower of a giant monster. And I could see it doesn't see me yet, but it's about 10 times the size of me. And I think I was at level 4 at this point. So I was going to get absolutely destroyed if I even sneezed. So I just booked it out of there, and then I managed to find a site of grace real quick just to activate it so that I could fast travel back there one day. But I'm like, I might wait till I'm a little bit higher level before I even attempt to look in the direction of this place again.
Yeah, you didn't actually go and try your luck there and see if you can see what you can do to them.
There's only so many times you can get your head crushed in before you just start to feel a little. Maybe I should. Be a little more aware of my surroundings.
When you're level 4 and you see someone that fills up the whole screen, it's probably not a great time to take them on, right? Maybe hold off a little bit.
I'm brave, but I'm also stupid. So
that's right. Alex, I wanted to ask about your kind of approach to the game, just playing it, how your minute to minute gameplay, what kind of decisions are you making? What drives you to go in a certain direction or to do certain activities in Elden Ring?
So when I actually kind of started playing this game, I was just very cautious, right? When I played games like Bloodborne and stuff, I felt like that was my go-to. But when I kind of just got out into the world and saw how vast it was, it's almost like my guard kind of got lifted and stuff. It almost kind of arrested me with how it looked. And it was just you know what? It's okay to die in this world. It's okay to explore. If things are too hard, just leave, because there's a ton more content. And so because the game kind of, reinforced that idea, I just kind of started exploring. Now, it took me a long time to kind of really latch onto the idea of, if it's too hard, leave. Like, I actually spent about 2 or 3 days trying to kill the troll that's like leading up to like the rampway going up to like Stormville Castle. And I was just like, this game is too hard. And then I started kind of exploring the immediate area, and because I told myself, this is not working. This is an open world. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I started exploring like the nooks and crannies, and better yet, I literally just rode my horse and went past that troll, and not knowing that I could just do that, so I was just like, oh, I could just do that. Like, I have a horse, like it just kind of clicked to me. Like, I don't need to face these enemies if I didn't want to. And then I faced Margit because at the very beginning, the path of grace basically led me to him, and I got stuck for a couple more days. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not doing something right. And then I actually literally restarted the game from scratch because I was like, I need to kind of find a better frame of mind to attack this game. And so instead of going right to that troll and Margit, I kind of just got to the site of grace where you meet Melina, and you get your horse, you can level up. Imagine you have to basically meet this woman to level up in this game. Right?
It took me 2 or 3 hours before I even found her, because I went in a different direction after the starting place. I went south rather than north, and so I didn't even run into her or get the horse or any of that stuff until hours into the game. I'm like, I'm kind of waiting, like, where is this? Where do I level up? Am I supposed to die and get there or something like that? And I think that's, again, one of the special things about the game is that all of us have this different experience of playing it. Even if we've all kind of seen, all part of the zeitgeist, we're all kind of like realizing it together. There's this communal aspect to it. There's also just the fact that it's such a big game and so many different directions you can go in.
Yeah. It's funny because so many people get angry when people compare Elden Ring to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I think the comparison is apt. I think the failure of both parties is to articulate why that is. So in the 30-minute video that I made, I articulated that part of the reason why it's being compared a lot is due to the design of the mini dungeons in Elden Ring being more of an elaboration of what Breath of the Wild was trying to do with its own shrines, right? Like the shrines in Breath of the Wild are very compact. The mini dungeons in Elden Ring are very compact, but it's a lot more elaborate because there are mazes, there's different variations, and it definitely felt, and they're not throwaways. Like, I feel like the puzzles in Breath of the Wild shrines are fine, but like they're not memorable. Like, there are memorable mini dungeons in Elden Ring, which kind of really complement your experience. But also part of that too is the way that the game is designed is really encourages that sort of wanderlust that you got from Breath of the Wild as well. It's like, hey, there's a big tower on top of like this kind of watery marsh and stuff that looks really cool. I'm going to go there. And that's the kind of thing that, games like these do it extremely well. Having like landmarks that are so attractive, it's almost like a moth to a flame at that point, right? Like, you're just attracted to it. You're like, ooh, I want to get killed there.
I mean, for Breath of the Wild, there's a couple things that stand out to me. One was just some of the initial demos that Miyamoto and Anuma-san kind of walked us through, right? One of the first things they showed on the Wii U, I guess, when they originally showcased the game, was this idea of looking into the distance, setting down a waypoint, and saying you can go there. And then you would go there, you'd climb a mountain, or you'd climb a tower, and you would glider down from it. And that I think that to me is like that prototypical part of the Breath of the Wild experience, is going up high and floating down to somewhere new. Of course, you can ride your horse too, but for me, it was always a travel up and then fall down. In Elden Ring, you get a little bit of that too, because there's a ton of elevation in the game. But the funny thing is that sometimes you'll fall off a ledge and you don't know if you're going to die necessarily or not, right? Or how much damage you're going to take. But just getting on the horse, and the fact that the horse can double jump, your horse can double jump, like that opens up so many possibilities for traversal. It's just wild to me that adding a jump for your character, but then a horse that can go really fast and can double jump and just feels like you can kind of turn on a dime with it too. Like, just movement in this game, exploratory movement, is insanely fun.
Yeah. I mean, these are all good things. And it's funny because after playing Elden Ring, I started going back to older games, and my goodness, like the quality of life in Elden Ring is incredible. Like, it's so difficult to go backwards.
Yeah, I mean, one part of that at least when I compare Elden Ring to previous Souls games is just the fact that there are so many sites of grace, and not just sites of grace, but also the statues of Marika, where if you die, you are not punished by being sent back super far, right? Like in other Souls games, if you like, just think about Demon Souls for a second here from PS5 or the original. There are some stages where if you die at the very maybe about halfway through the stage, you have to go to the very beginning and think about all the enemies that respawn. You have to claw your way through again. It can be pretty disheartening, right? Yeah. And again, it's part of that game. There's more condensed spaces. It's not meant to be an open world game, and that's fine. It's still really good on its own merits. But Elden Ring does something entirely different. And I think this is what really makes it approachable, is that death is not nearly as punitive in Elden Ring as it is in other games. Yes, you can lose your soul, you can lose your runes, and that can be devastating depending on what point of the game you are. But you can also get lots of runes very quickly in this game. There's so many places to grind out or to just get an insane amount of runes. But really, the progression isn't so much on runes. Once I kind of realized this, that progression is about getting a weapon that you're comfortable with, learning to use that weapon, and then leveling up your weapon, right? Going to a smith, improving your weapon to a +5 or a +10 or what have you. Equipping different arts to the weapon that might jive with your play style. Finding spirits to summon that again can work with how the way you like to play the game. There are so many ways to, I guess, deal with the action and combat part of this, the part of this experience, and just the sheer variety to Elden Ring is immense.
Yeah. And ironically, too, like, this is a formula that's existed all the way back to Demon Souls, right? Like, in Demon Souls, you can do the exact same thing. So it's not like this is this revolutionary thing that all of a sudden, like, they figured out, like, in 12 years later or something. No, it's literally at the core of the DNA of FromSoftware's games and all that.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that different from previous versions. Like, the combat feels pretty similar, especially Demon Souls. I think when like comparing the like the 60 FPS movement, like I felt like when Demon Souls came out, it just felt a little more it felt less stiff. Like I felt like I had better control of the characters, but it's still, when you go back to like Dark Souls, it's not that, like, the basic combat is still the same. Like it's really not that much different. And you're talking about the progression of like building up the weaponry and that sort of thing. Like for me, as a magic user, what I've been finding is that each time I get a new magic spell, I become, I don't know if more powerful, but I become more versatile. Yes. I was thinking of like this one, and it's funny. There's a guy at my work who got it when it came out, and we had like a half-hour chat about it today because we were talking about all the places we went. So I was telling him about, I had my first invasion, and it was at the Smoldering Church. And it's funny because he had an invasion at the Smoldering Church as well. And the thing with that was so I'm riding my horse and get kicked off the horse. I couldn't figure out why. And because it didn't immediately say that there was an invasion. I'm just like, did my horse die? What's going on? I don't know what's happening. And then the little message come up that says, Anastasia is invading you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I'm looking for the person, and they're like way off. I can see the red, way off in the distance. So I start like shooting pellets at them, like the pellet, the glintstone pellet, I think it's called, or pebble. And I hit them a couple times, but they had figured out that you just roll, and I kept missing. So I didn't want to really show my hand of like how much spells I actually had. So I just kept using it until they got closer and closer and closer, and I let them get right up to me, and then I pull out my massive magical sword that two-shotted them to death.
Yeah,
nice.
And it was like, if I didn't have that sword, I probably would have been creamed, because like this person had this huge great sword that they were trying to hit me with, and they had figured out how to dodge the pebble. But Just having that, when I run into an enemy where it's like, you know what, I can't, they're too fast or they're coming in too close. I need something else. And purchasing that sword maneuver or magic ability just like changed my combat style.
Yeah. I want to add something to what you said, because you talked about like talking to your coworker about this. I was picking something up at a Walgreens, right? And I was just like talking to my friend when I came into the store, and I was close to the counter and stuff. So I grabbed like what I needed and, hung up from my friend like on the phone. And I started talking to the guy, and he was like, "What game are you guys talking about?" It's like, I said like, "Oh, we're talking about Elden Ring." He's like, "Me too, man." And we just had like this long ass conversation, like, talking about like where we were in the game, what we're doing, what our builds are. And that's kind of like, I think, something that I talked about in my video, which is like Elden Ring is so much bigger than just what you find in the game. It's also like the community that's built up because of the systems in the game as well. And, kind of like what you share, David, it's like, you can literally walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, did you fight Placiduous X?" And somebody will be like, "Who is that?" And we'll all have this very different experience. And that's one of the reasons why I just absolutely love this game, because I can even enjoy the game without having to play the game, like what we're doing now.
Yeah, very, very much a water cooler type of game. Like even with the he was telling me about different ways to farm ruins and stuff. He's talking about like this when I had mentioned being warping myself to that one bestial chapel or whatever it's called. He was telling me, he's like, "Oh well, you should do that again, and there's this dragon that's kind of stuck in the dirt and he doesn't really attack you, so it's an easy way to kill him." And it's like, and then you get 80,000 ruins. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it's like like you said, like I hadn't even gone in that area, and he's like, helping with like ruin farming and stuff. So it's funny to have those kinds of conversations for sure.
David, with your luck, that dragon's been patched by now, and the next time you go and attack it to get your 80,000 ruins, it's going to turn on you with a big fire blast or something like that. And I know the one he's talking about, and I feel like I've learned, half a dozen places to grind for ruins that are all fun and interesting, and depending on where you are in the game, can be really useful. Some are as easy as like a boulder that's meant to crush you will just continue on down a hill and crush the enemies at the end of the hill, and then you get the ruins from that. Some of them are attacking a huge dragon that has maybe millions of hit points, but it doesn't really move, and you can just kind of bleed it to death. Other ones, you go to a place that you're not ready for at all, but it's just filled with all these enemies that grant you tons of ruins. And again, just the discovery of these things, whether that's going on Reddit or on YouTube, or talking to someone at work about things that they discovered, and then you can go and discover it too. And it's kind of the secret that you share, I guess, or that information you can share with someone else, right? It just kind of proliferates like that. It's one of the really enjoyable things about playing this game, and the fact that so many people are playing it, compared to 5 or 10 years ago when Bloodborne or even Sekiro, games before that came out. Like, just not as many people were getting into them, and they weren't all getting into them at launch, which it seems like there's this huge buildup of people playing the game and interest in the game around the Elden Ring's debut.
Yeah, I want you guys to consider this really cool fact, right? So obviously we know that Elden Ring sold 12 million copies even before the end of March. Did you guys know that the entire trilogy of Dark Souls pretty much amounted to that much?
I think I might have heard something like that, but it's still staggering to me that that's the case. And I guess it just speaks to, how... Is it something about Elden Ring? Is it something about people getting into the Dark Souls games later? Alex, what do you think? Like, why is this the case?
I really do think that, Elden Ring is kind of like a reaction to not just from what's happening internally at FromSoft, but also like to a lot of people's kind of gripes about the Souls series to begin with. And the reason why I bring that up is because for the longest time, FromSoftware has been kind of, I think at this point of understanding the series, unfairly kind of been told that they don't make accessible games. Now, that's always been a tough topic to breach because accessibility is a very difficult thing to address because there's so many different kinds of handicaps and kind of, things that people have to overcome. And so, and arguably, like, it's not just a From Software problem. It's a problem for like the entire industry.
Mhm.
And so I think that by opening up the world a little bit more, they've kind of allowed people to, to create their own fun in a way. And jokingly, a lot of people say that open world games are games where you create your own fun, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, especially with the way that Elden Ring plays. Because I think because of the core systems of Elden Ring, how strong its combat is, every time you pick a different weapon, it's a completely different game, right? Like you pick you pick a pike and start attacking with that. It's not going to be the same as like a colossal weapon or a bow or a magic staff or anything like that. It's all going to be different experiences, even within the same weapon type, right? Like a sword is not like a regular sword is not going to function the same as the Bloodhound Fang, which is also another kind of sword, or this or that. And I think that's kind of like what's amazing about this is you can make it as hard or as easy as you want it to be. And it still kind of falls within the purview of the goal of From Software as a developer, which is they want you to overcome hardship. That is the core principle of From Software. That is the goal. Not to make a difficult game, not to make an impossible game, but for you to feel great. For that feeling of accomplishment to really mean something. That is at the core of like their entire design. And, a lot of people have described From Software games to me in very different ways. Like other people are like, oh, well, they're very old school, like 8-bit style. And of course, at the time, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a 3D game. Like, it's not a platformer, but then
PS3's 8-bit now.
That's right? And but when I really sat down and thought about it, I released a video that's like 2 hours long of me trying to get the whip in Castle Morn, because me and my friend started talking about Elden Ring, and he's not playing it, by the way. But I said, I wonder if I could do a Castlevania-like playthrough with a whip, And he was like, oh man, that's a great idea. So I recorded it and commentated on it and stuff like that. But during that playthrough, it kind of something really like struck me, and I kind of had memories of playing the last 2 or 3 areas of Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, where all of the enemies can just 4-shot me and die, and I was like thinking to myself, wait a second. I had to deal with this BS like back in the 80s. This shouldn't be any different, And it even kind of enlightened me in a little bit and kind of started, and that kind of mindset made me really approach these games in a different way. And I think that's kind of like what's really cool about these. It's like they can mean different things to different people. And I think that's why the conversations surrounding these are always so fun. Like I know we have a list of places and things that we want to even talk about. I can't wait to talk about some of these. Like Siofor River, my God. Like, I can, dude, like it's so crazy. Like this game is so nuts.
I think we should get into it because there's a ton of stuff, and I know we're gonna piggyback on other people's ideas about their favorite things and the experiences we had in these places that we visited. So why don't we just get into that? David, you already mentioned the smoldering church you went to with this invasion by Anastasia, and how you defeated her. What about? I know one of your favorite places or moments is the beginning of the game, right? So why don't you tell us about your how that came to be? How did it make you feel? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it was like starting up the game. I've seen videos and pictures and stuff, so I knew it was going to be a beautiful game. But they definitely, and a lot of games are doing this now, where they kind of have that aha moment at the very beginning when you kind of take your first steps, and then you just kind of see how vast everything is. And I felt like that was basically the moment that you walked out of the what's it called again? It's like the Forgotten Graveyard or whatever, that first place you die. Like you wake up in you take the elevator up, and then you kind of walk out a few steps, and it's right before the first site of grace. But it just kind of shows you everything. Like you see the massive, like the massive tree that's glowing on the right, and then you could see Stormvale Castle at the top of a hill, and then you could see like the ocean on the left, and then you could see all the hills and all the foliage and everything. And it was just kind of this like, man, like this is because I had that moment with Demon Souls where it's like, man, everything looks beautiful here. Like, look at all this like massive castle structures and all this stuff. And I just think Elden Ring took it one step further, and because it has like all those same incredible castles and incredible landscape, architecture and stuff. But then the landscape of just the forest and the world are just incredible too.
The fact that you get to walk up to these castles and these structures, these towers, all of these things, right? Rather than being like teleporting through a painting or through a portal and just being in the castle, you're actually walking up to them. So you're seeing how big they are from the outside and trying to gauge like, oh, how is it actually going to be that big or that small on the inside? And you really don't have any idea of the scope until you get into it and you see that, it's got a basement and it's got tunnels and doors and pulpits, I think they're called, like the little towers that all castles have, things like that. I want to hit on one thing you mentioned, the idea of wherever you are, kind of coming out of the beginning of the game or out of a dungeon, out of a catacombs, whatever, and seeing the Erd Tree, and the Erd Tree kind of being in the center of the map and being this like kind of marker for you to kind of show you where you are in a way, right? Or to give you like a sense of like, okay, you're back to reality in a way. Like if you just finished a dungeon, you finish a catacombs, you finish doing something, and then you look around and you're like, oh, there's the Erd Tree again. It kind of reminds you or brings you back to, helps you kind of center yourself, I guess, in the game, or helps you kind of find where you are. I just love it as this kind of like North Star, so to speak. And the fact that like near the end of the game, or 3/4 of the way through the game, the tree can just burn down. Like you can just set the tree on fire, and then the whole world is kind of on fire. It's wild that kind of event can happen.
Yeah, I actually want to add to that because like I mentioned that in my 30-minute video. I know I'm mentioning my 30-minute video a lot. I'm sorry.
It's really good. Alex, you should keep mentioning it. That people need to watch that video. It's awesome.
Thank you. So in my video, I actually compared it to Disneyland and Disney World, because if you've ever been to those places, what is the one thing that you see from any part of the park? Yeah. It's the castle. Yeah. It's always there. And from a urban planning standpoint, if you're if you've ever been to Paris, it's exactly the same thing. You see the Eiffel Tower from everywhere. And the main reason why they do that is because there's actually a city limit to how much height you can build your building while you're in Paris. So that way you can see the Eiffel Tower from everywhere. And so the fact that that Elden Ring has something like that, as you said, it's like a North Star, but it's almost like kind of like a weird compass that not only serves as a guide, so to speak, of your relative location in the world, but also has a storytelling element to it. Is just a stroke of genius. Like, as you said, like it can burn down. Like that is such a powerful moment when you see that. And it's just like mind blown that you can literally see that everywhere. And you're like, wow, that is like, and even that presence, right? The presence of the Erd Tree everywhere, that already in itself tells a pretty strong story.
Yeah, and in this world, you'd think something golden, shiny like this, and it's akin to heaven, or it could be like this very positive influence in the game, but it's also very negative too. Like if you think about the story and the lore, like the Erd Tree is not your friend. It's not meant to make your life easier necessarily. Like it can also be considered maybe the root of the problems or the root of the issues that you're encountering in the game. But yeah, I think compass is a really good metaphor for it, though, Alex.
It's funny that you mention root, because that's literally what it does, right?
Yeah.
Because like all of the graveyards in the game have the roots of the Erd Tree.
Yes.
And because death is no longer a thing, like the Erd Tree is literally absorbing all of the ashes of all these, like entombed people. And it's just kind of absorbing it into itself, which, that's what that's what it is. It's the greater will that's taken over the Erd Tree, right? And all of a sudden it's like a good guy. And what's funny, I'm realizing that we probably could do another episode with just the lore.
Yes, of course. Of course. It's tons of it, right? Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. Alex, why don't you? So that's kind of one of David's first ones. Coming out of the graveyard. This just jaw-dropping moment where you're seeing everything around you, and you're realizing, just how beautiful this world is for the first time. You mentioned Siofra River. Do you want to start with that one? I think it's a fantastic place to talk about too.
Oh my gosh! So I don't want to take away from David's, because that opening moment. When you see the world for the first time, I actually broke that down in my follow-up video, which was like my 2-hour playthrough of the game. And I literally put arrows to like all the locations, like, because you don't just see like Stormvale, you also see the starting area.
Yes.
Well, and the church, so everything is there. But Siofra River was the first one that really made my jaw drop. Like literally, like it's underneath a very unassuming building. It's just in the middle of this, at the time, it's just a really boring kind of foresty area. And, looking back and kind of looking at the map right now, it's still kind of boring, but there's obviously a very good reason for that, because there's a big hole in the ground that opens up. But for that particular building, I walked into that building trying to avoid the rune bears in that area, because there's a ton of bears in that area.
Yes.
And then you go down and you're like, I was looking at my watch. I'm like, wow, we're going down really, really far down, right? Like it was like just going by really fast too, speed wise. And then all of a sudden, like windows open up in front of you and you see stars. And I was like, wait, we're going down. We're not going up. What is happening here? And what's really cool about that is that you see the twinkling lights, up in the sky, it seems like. But then if you look carefully, the light is actually reflecting off of the surface of the cave. Mm-hmm. And it's actually like stuck onto the top of this massive cavernous area. And so I was just like, oh my God, there is a completely different world underneath this entire large freaking map. Like I was literally that reaction. And, when I finally got down, I started looking up and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is not the only underground area. There's going to be a ton more of these. And it just like blew me away. I was like, this is absolutely insane. And I started thinking about like what the stories they're trying to tell by absorbing like the environment and the background as I was playing through it. Deaths along the way, many deaths.
Yes, of course.
It was just so overwhelming. Like I was playing with my wife and I looked over at my wife. I'm like, dude, like what? this is so crazy.
It's right up there with A Link to the Past and finding the Dark World for the first time, or Final Fantasy VI and leaving the world of balance, entering the world of ruin. This realization that there's this whole other world that is connected to or underneath the world that you've been exploring, right? That you know the first time you go into this underground and you look at that map, it's not just this one river, it's not just this one small part, that it's going to be a massive area under here. And it doesn't match the size of the world of the map above ground, but it's large enough that it does feel like its own really, really massive space that you can just play in. And there's so many cool things to find out of there for sure. You mentioned it, like seeing the stars in the sky as if the world is kind of flipped on itself or something like that. It is really, that's one of the most beautiful places in the game for sure.
Yeah. And it's also very shocking too, to think that, of how the game actually disseminates information through the map, right? Because when you start the game, it's this little tiny map and you're like, I can explore this game. What are people talking about that this is a big game? And then you go to the edge and then you notice the map extends to the right and you're like, wait a minute. And you go south, and then the map extends south. And you're like, wait a sec. So literally, like, they've only showed you a small portion of the map, and only until close to the end of the game that you really realize how massive the map is. Mm-hmm. And, I made sure to kind of point that out in my video, because a lot of other games can't help but show you how big their maps are, right? Like, it's kind of like this weird, like, I don't want to say anything, like too raunchy, but like, they can't. They're so excited to show you their girth, so to speak, their girth of experience, that they're like, well, look at this, and I even opened up and installed like Assassin's Creed Odyssey to compare, and I looked at it and I'm like, my goodness, there's like no reasonable way to do that, to just get through that in a timely fashion. And here I was like around 60 to 70 hours, like already like towards the end of the game. And I was like, obviously it's, the amount of time people play is going to be variable depending on like how much you explore. But that's kind of the beauty of it. It's like you can take as much of it or as little of it as you want. I have a friend who actually finished the game, including beating Millennia at around 50 hours. And that's a valid experience.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, anyone's experience with this game is valid. And that's, we've talked about the way that you can just enjoy this game in so many different ways. I think you bring up a good point about the way that the map it kind of manipulates itself, or the way that it grows outward rather than just showing you everything at once. And, I think of a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where I'm at this point in my life where I'm turned off by a game that just, plunks down the whole map and says, look how much there is to do. It's too much. I really like what Elden Ring did, where the map seems to grow as you explore. And another part of that feeling of being rewarded for exploring is not only do you see more of where you are, you see more of what could be. And you get this idea of, okay, if I'm stuck here, I've opened up the side of the map. I can see that there's something to the east. I can see there's something to the north, and I can go there when I get stuck or when I feel like I want to do some exploring tonight. Maybe my play session tonight is going to be about exploring a new area of the map rather than taking on a boss, or rather than doing some grinding for ruins or crafting materials or something like that. Like all of that is just the way the map works in this game is just really fascinating to me. I really hope we see more. I hope we see open world games kind of learn that lesson, that it doesn't have to be just plunked down on a plate like an all you can eat buffet. And here's all the food, go and get it. Rather, it's you can have as much as you want, or there is a lot to have, but we're going to give it to you in kind of meaningful portions. And when you're done with that, you can move on to the next meaningful portion rather than just gorging yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
I laughed at so I was kind of a little northwest of Stormvale Castle, because I figure I wasn't ready to take on the boss there. So I started to explore, and I ran into this woman who had lost her necklace. So I was like, okay, it's probably around here somewhere, find it, bought it, brought it back to her, and she gave me, and she was happy, she gave me an invitation to like Volcano House or something. It's like this.
Yeah, Volcano Manor, yeah.
Yeah, Volcano Manor. So really she's cool like, place. Oh, well, you have to go here, and then you can go here, and then then it'll take you up, and you'll be able to get to the manor. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking on the map, and I'm like, I don't know what this cliff she keeps talking about is. So I went and Googled it, and I'm looking at the map, and I'm thinking, like, this isn't Elden Ring. Like, I don't recognize any of these places. What is this thing? And I open my map on the screen, and I'm looking at my map, and I'm trying to find any kind of commonality. And I'm like, clearly I'm not looking at the right game. This is not, none of these things are on my map. Yeah. So then I found like this interactive map where I started to scroll out, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And I'm like, why did the map is like three or four more maps of like what I actually had. I couldn't it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Alex, I mean, I definitely had that feeling when I first discovered this whole underground area. I think the first one for me was when I entered a part of the underground where it's just filled with ants, right? And I know I talked about this in a previous episode, just, fighting these ants, these huge oversized ants. You find this, there's almost like a colony of them. And it's just like, just finding them for the first time and realizing, getting a better understanding of how big this game is going to be. And that, that exploring that part of the map, that underground area where I first found the ants, and kind of running through the river and this whole new area, like that took me hours and hours. And I never felt like, oh, this is just more extra work for me to do. Because every time you discover something new, it feels like you've made some big progress. You're going to get some items, you're going to get something important. You're going to find some sites of grace that always feel super rewarding. No matter when you light up one of those beacons, it that this is a place I can come back to later. right? Or that I'm going to want to come back to later. Or, you know, if I die to these ants, and I probably did die, you know, multiple times to them, especially when they spit out some acid breath kind of thing, and it kills you in like one shot or something like that. I remember that. But yeah, that's a really good one, Seal for a River. I've got a couple. I'm going to save mine for the end because mine are a little bit more about characters at the roundtable hold I want to talk about. So, David, why don't we go back to you? Why don't you give us another one of your kind of areas or moments that really stood out to you?
Yeah, so it's funny. Alex actually mentioned this earlier. For me, one big standout was Castle Morn, and it's funny because I found this site of grace, and it was way north of Castle Morn. Like I don't even think I could see the castle where I was standing, and so I'm like, you know, I triggered the site of grace, and then I was kind of standing just a little bit away from it, and I was looking at something in my inventory. All of a sudden, I hear this massive crash. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm looking around, and beside me is this, it looks like a freaking javelin. And it's this huge thing, and it's like it just missed me. And so I'm like, who threw this? Like there must be a giant somewhere. So I'm like walking along, and all of a sudden another javelin like flies by my head, and I'm like, who's shooting these things? And he's like, start walking towards it. And I finally see the castle, and I see a giant standing in front of the castle, and it's not a javelin, it's an arrow. The arrow is so big that it's a javelin to me, but it's an arrow to this goof down who's been firing that at me from like halfway across the map. And so I found this little spot where I was standing on a rock, and he kept hitting the rock. Like he would hit the boulder in front of me. So I could just like fire my rock magic at him, and I actually killed him pretty quickly. But I'm like, okay, if this guy looks pretty powerful, if he's, you know, guarding this place must be pretty cool. So there's a site of grace when you first walk in the door. So I'm like, okay, good. You know, I'm probably going to get massacred here, but at least I won't have to go far. And, you know, so you go up an elevator, and the first thing I see is like thousands of bodies piled in this big freaking mound. And there's all these like trolls dancing on the pile of bodies. And I'm like, oh my God, this place is a nightmare. So I kind of went in and started firing off my my pebble shooter or whatever, and managed to get past it and everything. But it was just neat because you take out the trolls that are dancing on the corpses of all the people that lived in this castle, and then you kind of start going up and around the castle, and there's every manner of beings in this thing. Like you got the trolls, and then there's like these other like flying troll things, and then I accidentally fell into a trap. I knew it as soon as I'm looking at like. There was a body on the ground, and there was clearly something to pick up from it. And it was just placed in a way that it's like, if I walk over there, something's going to get me. And I'm like, but you know me. I'm like, no, there's treasure there. So I'm just going to go take it. And this like blob just drops on my head, and like, it just encompasses my body. And I'm like trying to jump, trying to do anything to get out of this thing. But then, I actually found the whip that Alex had mentioned. I haven't actually used it yet. Like I've probably got like an inventory of 100 things. I don't even know what's in my inventory. I haven't used any of the talismans yet, or I've been so busy. And then, and then I managed to get like the boss of the castle. The boss for the castle is not even in the castle. It's the funniest thing.
He's outside. That's right.
He's outside the castle. But like to see this like castle that was completely destroyed. It's just a kind of like a neat lore thing, because I don't even think it's part of the main quest or anything. I think it's just like a side quest to kind of do at your leisure. But yeah, the boss like destroyed me, because even though I used I kind of got comfortable with the tactic of I'll drop my poison rat summon and just let the poison rat bite the boss until it becomes rotten. And then I just try to like run in circles until the rot kills the boss. And so I thought I would, it worked on Margit, and it worked on a couple other bosses, but this boss is just too fast. Like it was just on me in a heartbeat. So I figure I'll come back later, but it's just a neat little place. Like there was like before I went in, I think there was like a servant from the place that actually warned me that like, everyone's torn to shreds in that castle. But if you can clean it out, that'd be wonderful. I'm like, all right.
One of the Castle Morn's one of the very early. I don't think it's a mandatory place you have to visit, but a pretty cool one for sure. That boss gave me a lot of trouble when I first fought him as well, David. I didn't have the poison rat. I don't even know what summons. I'm sure I had the wolves and I had a jellyfish one as well. But one of the cool things about this one that stood out to me, Castle Morn, there's a girl outside. Her name is Irina. I believe she's blind or blinded. She wears like a blindfold over her eyes. And she gives you a letter, and it's kind of one of the first side quests you probably encounter. Certainly one that's very easy to complete. She gives you a letter for her dad. Her dad is in the castle. Eventually, you probably find him, or not, but you can find him somewhere near the top of the castle, I believe. His name's Edgar. You give him the letter, and he kind of tasks you with getting this great sword back from him, and you'll get the great sword from defeating the boss of the castle. So that's one of the things I guess one of the rewards you get. You bring him back the great sword in the castle. And the way that the quest concludes, there's only a couple steps to it, but the way that it concludes is with you kind of leaving the castle, and you go to where Irina was, kind of just outside of it, and you see Edgar has found her and she's been killed, right? And it makes sense that she can't see, she's kind of helpless, right? Edgar kind of finds her. He's kind of made this choice to defend the castle rather than look after or take care of her, right? So you come back and you see this scene where Edgar's kind of he's wrought with he's kind of overcome with his emotions. But rather than just be sad about it, the ending emotion, or the kind of final emotion you get from him, is one of revenge. Like, I'm gonna destroy everything, or everyone that's responsible for killing my daughter. I'm gonna kill them. I didn't know this, but I was looking up the quest line, and apparently there is a callback to Edgar in Arena later in the game. I don't know where you find it, but Edgar becomes one of the NPCs that invades you when you go to one of those abandoned shacks. And so I think his name is Edgar the Ravager or something like that. But I think the meaning here is that he's just kind of given in to this feeling of revenge, right? So a cool kind of story, minor story quest line there that you can do. You don't need to do it, sure, but just one of those cool things you come across, and an interesting resolution to it for sure.
Yeah, it's actually located to the west of the Academy of Raya Lucaria.
Okay, yes.
Slightly north of the Minor Erdtree. And you basically encounter a shack called the Revenger's Shack.
Okay.
And there, Edgar the Revenger shows up. And,
right.
It's very tragic, but it's like, at the same time, it's kind of like, when that happened, I was just like, oh, I'm probably going to fight you later. I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah. Typical kind of Soulsborne situation, right? Like a character overcome by a negative emotion, and then you end up having to take them out later. Yeah, we've definitely seen that before.
Yeah.
The Castle Morn, a really good one, David. I really enjoyed that early part of the game for sure. Definitely sets the pace once you get there and you finish that off. You feel like you can kind of accomplish something, even though you haven't pushed the story forward necessarily, but you feel a little bit more capable and ready for what comes next. Alex, do you want to kick off another one from your list?
Okay, I have way too many things on this list, but I'll pick something that happened fairly recently, this past weekend actually, which happens to be in Volcano Manor of all things.
Oh, great! Yeah.
So.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so basically, this is my favorite part because it is so disgusting. And I was just like, I didn't even know this was going to happen. And my wife was kind of like helping me out here too, because she had gone through Volcano Manor as well. And so I killed Praetor Rykard. So that was a fun fight. And then, she basically told me like, yeah, so tell Lady Tanith that you did that and stuff. And, and then come back there and try to talk to her and then go back to the arena. So I'm like, of Praetor Rykard, like, there's something that happens there. She's like, oh yeah, like just check it out. So I teleported to the side of Grace in Rykard's arena, and you see like Tanith like on all fours just like eating the carcass of the head of Praetor Rykard because she wants to be blessed to be a serpent.
Yeah.
And so my wife is like, well, you have a choice. You want to kill her or you want to let her live? And I'm like, well, this is pretty disgusting. So I just just killed her.
We don't need another serpent to fight. We're good.
Yeah, no. And so like her friendly Crucible Knight buddy shows up, tries to kill me, but I'm like, dude, I've fought like 9 of you already. I know how you're gonna freaking fight, and killed the shit out of it. And so I was like, all right,
it's good.
cool. But that is such a shocking scene because, like, the game is dark, right? But you don't know how far the game is going to go in its darkness, especially if you're unfamiliar with the previous games. So literally, like, when I saw, like, the just part of Rykard's head just like lopped off, like, and then hearing Lady Tannis say, "Oh my lord, just take, just wait for me. It takes so long to consume all of you." And I was like, "What, lady? What is happening? This is disgusting." So I was like, slash.
And just an easy thing to miss, right? That I bet a lot of players who play this game, they take out Praetor Rykard. They're not going back to that arena once you've killed the boss. And yes, you get the Site of Grace, but you're probably not going to go back there unless you picked up on something Tanith might have said, or you just had a suspicion, like, oh, okay, I'm going to go back and check out some of the old places that I haven't been back to, see if something's happening there. But if Tanith doesn't drop, a hint or a signal to you after beating the boss that she is going to consume him, you don't really have that reason to go back there. So yeah, just a really cool, not an Easter egg, but just one of those little things that the game adds that, majority of players might miss, but just a really cool thing to go back to. And then another, obviously, not pretty gruesome, right? But just a cool thing that, it makes the game so worth exploring and just returning to, and knowing that every time you play this game, you're probably going to find something different like this.
Yeah. And in the storyline, like, Tanith actually says after you defeat Rykard that she was going to go on a long journey, right? Like, that's what she says. And I was like, yeah, like your reaction, I was exactly the same with me. I'm like, okay, sure, lady. A
long journey behind the castle or underneath the castle or underneath the manor to where Praetor Rykard's body is, right? Yeah.
Well, not even where, right? Like, consume it, to eat it. So that way she becomes a serpent. I was like, nah, no, lady, this is not at all. But I think that does lend to how the game actually tells its story. And something that I talked about in my video was that the game doesn't have a traditional narrative in that sense, but because of the way that FromSoft has kind of infused its story across all of its items, the landscape, the enemies that you fight. It's almost like you're going on an archaeological dig, and you and your fellow players are tasked with piecing the story together. That's why there's like 1 million YouTubers like talking about the lore right now, because we're all kind of piecing together the knowledge that we've accumulated, across, like, at this point, millions of hours of playthrough across 12 million people.
And there's so much more to come, right? Like, I imagine there's going to be DLC. There might be a sequel to this game down the line, but there's still so much more to discover just about this game. And I've started, Alex, I watched your video. I've been starting to watch some of Vadi Vidya's content on YouTube, and my YouTube page, after watching a couple of Elden Ring videos, I'm now flooded with videos that have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of views now. Like, everyone is going crazy for this game. It's not just people playing it, and I imagine now it's so much of people that have finished it and are going back and kind of combing through it. Archaeological dig, that's a really good way to express it as well. We're all kind of thinking about that now. We're in that mode a little bit after going through the game and seeing the main story. Now we're trying to figure out, what does it all mean, and what did we miss on our playthrough that that could be a really cool thing to come back to. Yeah,
and if you really think about it, right, like, some of the most successful games are able to create conversations outside of itself, right? To give an example, if you think about the entire Five Nights at Freddy's series and the gameplay, well, the gameplay is not really that interesting. But then when you look into the lore and the story of what's actually happening behind the scenes with all the clues that its creator kind of leaves, that's where a lot of the interest actually comes in. That's where things become interesting, because he's telling a story here, but in the most indirect way. And Elden Ring and actually FromSoftware in general, has been doing this for years. And now that more people are actually into this, like, people are now kind of getting to experience that. And I want to be clear for people who actually aren't playing Elden Ring. The reason why a lot of people are playing it isn't necessarily because that they're trying to become, like part of the cool kids club or something like that. It's more along the lines of like becoming part of the mystery, like engaging yourself in what the community is talking about, and also, creating discussions on like, well, what is happening in my game. And I think that's why so many YouTubers make videos on these, is because, if you tackle this by yourself, it's a nigh impossible thing to understand.
Mhm.
But with others, much like how other player messages or deaths kind of help you in the game, inform you of what's about to happen, it's kind of the same thing as happening to, uncovering its lore and story,
Yeah. One just before we move off the Volcano Manor, there is a side quest there that you can do where you kind of become an assassin for hire, and I thought that was a really fun part too. You're basically hired to murder people. It reminded me of like Assassin's Creed or something like that, right?
This is at Volcano Manor.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I know where I need to go then.
You got this is right up your alley, David. You get these letters, and they're kind of like I don't think they're overly hard to decipher. They kind of mark a place on your map, and then you go to the place on your map, and an invader pops up, and you fight them, and then you go back and you kind of cash in the fact that, oh, I beat this guy. Okay, you get the next letter, and then you get to go on to the next one, and it's just a really fun part of the game that there isn't. I hadn't come across something like that to that point. Hadn't met a ton of invaders by that point as well. But to go and like hunt people down was pretty cool. There might be something else you have to do to get them to show up, Alex. I might be missing a detail there, but I just remember kind of completing each one, moving on to the next one. And there's a character at Volcano Manor in one of the side rooms, and he's kind of celebrating you or clapping you on the back, good job. You you murdered those people. Like, good for you. You're one of us now. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm a murderer. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, it's just something I hadn't expected about that location, but it is a super dark area. So it does fit.
And a very red area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
But like, to kind of add to what you said, all you need to do is to join Volcano Manor and you get these contracts. And, to kind of add more clarity to this, it kind of simulates you invading somebody else's game, because you find a summon thing on the ground, you use it, and then you get quote unquote loaded into somebody's game, and then they'll show up and you have to kill them. And what's really cool about this storyline is that there's also a subtext that's also like a side story that's happening in the background as well. One of the servants, the person with the necklace, has her own story. So if you continue her storyline, you can actually explore the rest of Volcano Manor. Or if you don't do that, you can literally complete all the assassination contracts and go directly to Rykard himself.
Right.
You don't even have to do the dungeon at all. But it's an option. So I actually like explored as much of the dungeon as I can, so that way I have access to this person, to Raya. And then right after that, I was just like, I'll just finish the assassination contract, so I don't have to go through all this hoopla, and I could just go to Rykard directly. So, but so convenient.
It's cool that you can do both. I love that you have multiple paths to get to that boss that you need to take out. One final thing about the fight with Rykard, I love maybe people see them as kind of gimmicky, but it is a fight where you get like a special weapon in front of it that lets you do this very, very powerful kind of. It reminded me of some. This is a very obscure reference, I suppose, but in Captain Commando, and I'm specifically thinking about him in the Marvel versus Capcom games, he has a final move where he basically shoots this big laser beam up in the air like a sword, and then chops it down. And this reminded me a lot of Captain Commando's move. You basically get a spear that extends out like a lightsaber or something like that, and you basically use it to chop down Praetor Rykard's the two forms, the serpent form, and then I guess when he actually emerges from the serpent. But I kind of like those gimmick fights. Like I like the one from Demon Souls where you get the Stormcaller one and you're shooting the big tornadoes out. Like I think they're kind of fun, and let you do let you do combat in a different fashion that you might not have done before. So I'm always into those ones.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do one where we're getting close to the time where we usually cut off. So I'll probably do one more, and we can do like a final thoughts kind of thing as well. I want to give a special shout out to the Roundtable Hold. I think it's a really unique and interesting place. Like, almost all the Soulsborne's games, they have a hub where, NPCs are going to come together, or where kind of side quests branch off of, or where you use the hub to kind of go to all the different areas. And Roundtable Hold is kind of like that, in that it's the place where most of the NPCs kind of gather, right? Like, obviously there are a ton throughout the world, but there's this one condensed space that it's a safe space, right? You can go there, you can feel like you're not going to get attacked. You can, there's a smith there, Master Hugh. There's a woman there, Roderica, who will eventually go there, and you can use her to level up your summons. There's a person who kind of provides you information, eventually gives you rewards in Gideon. I love how he's kind of like the gatekeeper at first, where he's like, oh no, you haven't really done anything yet. You don't belong here. But then, once you get your first major rune, and then he kind of welcomes you into the Roundtable Hold proper, you're one of us. Then he starts kind of working together with you. There's a shop where you can bring these ball bearings, and if you bring more of the ball bearings to these two sisters, they basically let you buy more things there, including crafting materials and smithing stones and stuff like that too. There's a girl on a bed named Fia, and I thought the story around her, at launch was really interesting. Like, oh, there's this girl who wants to give you a hug or embrace you, but you shouldn't do that. Like, don't let her hug you. It's not good for you. And I just thought that kind of panic over this character was really interesting. Basically, if you let her embrace you, she puts a debuff on your character that reduces your total health. She also gives you a consumable item, the Baldachin's Blessing, and so you can kind of get rid of the debuff quickly, but it's just remember the panic around this character, and be very careful about a character not being entirely helpful to you in a very safe spot. I thought that contrast was pretty interesting. But yeah, I like the Roundtable Hold a lot. I like its design, all the books and everything that's everywhere. And then how it's basically kind of crumbling and destroying after the Ur Tree is set on fire. And so many of the characters that were there, they leave, and it really feels desolate. And that you've made a big choice that has really affected not just you in this world, but all these people that you've met before too.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys something about the Roundtable Hold. Have you guys found the physical location of it?
I feel like I did come across it. I can't, is it underneath, what's the one? I'm thinking of an L.
It's in the capital.
Yeah, that the Lanedale, right? Or
Lanedale, yes.
Yeah. It's underneath there, right?
No, it's just one of the buildings.
Oh, it's just one of the buildings, yeah.
Yeah, just right before you fight the the spectral Godfrey, for the lack of a better term.
Sure,
there's a little chapel on the side that you can kind of jump down to.
That's
and then
right.
when you start exploring it, you're like, wait a minute, this looks entirely
I've
familiar.
been here before, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's when you kind of realize that, like, the Roundtable Hold is this, kind of spectral world. And the funny thing too, and mind you, I'm not a FromSoftware expert, but apparently this is a theme that's been running for a long time for FromSoftware games. Like, a lot of these locations are typically locations that you'll encounter again later in the games. Like, the Hunter's Dream in Bloodborne is a really good example of that, right? Like, and that like shocked me that this was actually like an ongoing theme in their games. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, I remember when I first encountered that. It's been a little while since I've played the game, but I remember finding that and being like, okay, this is. I know I've been here before. This is really interesting. Where are all the people? Like, why? What has happened here? But it's another one of those fantastic, environmental storytelling things that happens. Like, you see, a place that's been destroyed, and you see the kind of what it could be, and then what it eventually became, right? That contrast that happens. Yeah. But yeah, I love the characters that you meet there, from the people where you bring them, spell books, and you can buy spells from them. There's just all manner of types, like people that are helpful, people that are threatening to you, ones that are really, happy to see you, or will offer you side quests to go on. There's even the area that there's like kind of doors to unlock as well. Like it's almost a puzzle too, that, when you first get to the round table hold, not all of it is accessible to you, but as you go through the game, you're going to get things or get abilities or learn things that are going to allow you to expand the hold and find the treasures that are kept in there as well. What I just wanted to kind of go back to the Master Hugh and Roderica characters just a little bit before I move on. And I love their relationship at the end of the game, where Roderica really feels kind of bad for Master Hugh. She wants him to leave. She wants him to kind of save himself or to go somewhere else. But he's stubborn. He's trapped in this place, or he feels, compelled to stay here and help you, or, help someone to end all of this, right? To become the Elden Lord, or to put everyone out of their misery, for lack of a better phrase. And I love her kind of her tone in the, I guess, the voice actress who does her lines, the writing there. I really felt kind of sad about that. She feels very badly about this one fellow's situation. She wants to get him out of there. And there's kind of a relationship between the two, that they're kind of working together to help you improve, to buff your weapons and your summon spirits. But also, they kind of mutually feel bad for each other. It feels like, get her out of there, get him out of there. They do care about each other, and I think that really does come through by the end of the game. So I really liked that pair of characters, and one of the reasons why I would frequent the Roundtable Hold quite often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a cool area. Like, I just absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to quickly do one more place? I'll do mine at the end. But David, is there one more area, or even just a final thought about the game? Obviously, you've got still many more hours to put in, I think. But even where you are now, or the last kind of cool thing you saw?
Yeah, I guess it's just the feeling of finding things, like, just to go back to the accessibility real quick. Like I said, I just feel like Alex kind of nailed it with the, just maybe the way it's set up. It's just made where it's easier to kind of play your way. Like, I remember playing in like Dark Souls, where you get to the point where it's like, you run into a really tough character and you have a hard time fighting them, whatever. There's nowhere to run. Like in Dark Souls, there's nowhere to, like, you could try to run, but it's still like this itty bitty path. Like, I remember, early on in Dark Souls, I pissed off one of the Black Knights, and I'm like, okay, like, I clearly can't beat you, so I'm going to run out of here. And and you're just kind of going through these narrow little pathways, and then, and then he got me because it was really like, I just couldn't get away fast enough. But in Elden Ring, like I had like the exact same thing with the troll at the beginning, where it's like, you see this big archway, and all the sites of grace are pointing towards it. And you're like, okay, this is clearly where I'm supposed to go. So I started walking up, and then this massive troll drops down in front of me. And I'm like, okay, there's the odds of me defeating this thing at this point in the game. Like, I'm like an hour in, like, I'm just going to get wrecked. And, so I think I was using bow and arrow at the time. So I shot an arrow, and I'm like, okay, that did about 2 damage. So I'm just getting the hell out of here. And I actually could get away. Like, it's an open world. You could actually get away. I didn't even I don't even think I had my horse at that point. I just ran as fast as my legs could take me. And I just, and it's funny because I'm like running away, and then I'm like running through that little, that stronghold that were, so like now I've got the troll chasing me, and then I had like the guards chasing me, and I'm just running, and not looking back, just like running for my life. And then, I'll let the guards worry about the troll or whatever. And I eventually got away, and everybody kind of just walked back to where they were. And it's like moments like that where it's like, the heart's, racing, and, hands are sweating, and you're like holding buttons, clicking buttons, you're like jumping, you're doing anything to survive. And there's just, that's like my takeaway from this game, I guess, is that there's just so many moments like that where it's the exhilaration of the moment is, there's a lot of high highs, and it's just, even I think I've only had it for about a week, and probably played 15 to 20 hours, somewhere around there. And it still feels brand new. Like with that many hours in it, I still feel like I've barely started or barely.
We really have. There's so much more to go, and so many cool things you're going to see, and maybe we'll have to revisit the game later in the year. Or if there's going to be, if the DLC does end up coming out, which I wouldn't be surprised, we're definitely have to get together and talk about that too. But I'm excited for you to see more of this game, and I'm excited to meet some people at work that I recommended the game to. But I haven't talked to them since. I haven't really heard about their experiences. I'm so excited to see kind of how they went through the game. What kind of moments did they have, like the one you're describing, David? It's funny to go from riding on your horse, just admiring the scenery, seeing what you see, finding a shack, lighting up a site of grace, and then 2 seconds later, you're running for your life, or your horse has been destroyed or disappeared magically, and you're in a fight for the rest of your life, right? Maybe you ran out of potions or something like that too, and you're in big trouble. It's all great. Alex, any kind of final thoughts or final moment or memory you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I still have a lot of memories and kind of things to say about the game, of course, that, an hour or so podcast is not going to contain at all.
Definitely.
But I think that, for the longest time, I just never really understood what the deal is with FromSoft's games. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the series and the games that they make that, gets touted around by a lot of loud people and stuff. And I think, like my only hope, and I know this is, again, tooting my own horn, that's pretty much like one of the reasons like why I made my video is for people who have never really wanted to play these sorts of games to kind of understand where the games are actually coming from. Not just Elden Ring, but also the entirety of the FromSoftware suite, right? Like I did a ton of research, like talking about Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director and the creator of all these games, talking about like his personal experiences that influenced the design of several portions of the game, including the multiplayer and all that stuff. And if you really, and I find that there's so much more to love in games once you get down to the humanistic aspect of these titles and stuff. And I think Elden Ring kind of really defines a lot of that desire of connecting humanity together, much more so than games like Death Stranding. Even though I love that game, like I've, now playing a FromSoft game, I'm kind of like, sorry, Kojima, but Miyazaki did a pretty good job of exemplifying what you wanted to do, sticks and all. I know that's like a weird in joke, but and I think that it's well worth pursuing to try to at least understand what it's doing, even if you're not interested as a game player. Because I think, I'm of the belief that I think as fans of video games, I think it's also just as interesting to know what's going on around us and in the things that we're not interested in, then in addition to like indulging in the things that we love. And that's really, I think, all I can say about that.
No, that's great. I think the idea of kind of exploring outside of your kind of normal habits, your comfort zone, so to speak, I think that's great. I think that, if you didn't want to play Elden Ring, that's fine. But I think there's so much interesting content being created about the game that you should try to get into that. Watch Let's Plays, watch speed runs, watch video essays like yours, Alex. Like all these things that can express how people are engaging with this thing. That can be one way that you engage with it, right? But yeah, find a way to explore and discover and maybe get into this game, because it is an absolutely super special one that I guess the thing that I want to end with is I'm so interested to see how the video game landscape is going to adjust or correct or change based on the reception to Elden Ring. Like I imagine this is going to be a title that affects game development for years and years to come. And it's another one of those kind of seminal titles like Breath of the Wild was, like Skyrim was, that other developers, other studios are going to try to iterate on, right? They're going to take lessons from this game and they're going to try to make their own version, or they're going to change their game, maybe the one that's already in production, and see if they can, adjust it to match some of the things that work really well in Elden Ring. So I'm excited to see how this game kind of has that ripple effect on the industry. And I know it's going to be, years to come for maybe some of those changes, but that's the thing that I'm really excited about. I will come back to this game. I will play it again. I'm very much a person who, like, once I get to the end, and I kind of agonized over this. I get to the Elden Beast, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm at the final boss. I know I'm about to kind of cross that threshold where I'm not going to go back to this game. I'm not going to play it for a little while. And there's always something really, really bittersweet about that. But especially a game like this where you've put in, 50, 60 plus hours, and that these are your final moments in the game. It hurts. It hurts to kind of even remember that. But I'm so glad that we all had this experience, and another chance to talk about the game with you, Alex, was really fun. I don't think we'll do a last call here. This was a good kind of length episode, but down the line, maybe we'll talk about what we want from Elden Ring DLC or a sequel. And yeah, like we quickly said off the hop, the next time a Bandai Namco game comes out, another RPG, we'll definitely have to have you on again, Alex. But I think we'll wrap up here. Alex, can you tell us where people can find you? How can people get to your content? Backlog Battle, obviously, you're doing a lot of cool stuff there. So where can people find you?
Well, people can find me at youtube.com/backlog battle. I have a Twitter account, but since there's like some weird things happening there, I don't know if it'll still be there, but you know what?
Come to Mastodon. Yeah. Come to Mastodon.
That's right.
That's where the cool kids are going.
I'm probably still going to be on Twitter, twitter.com/mybacklogbattle, because Backlog Battle's been taken for some reason. And I'm also on Instagram, Backlog Battle as well on there. I do have a TikTok, but I barely updated it. But you'll mostly find me on youtube.com/backlog battle, celebrating our 5th anniversary. Such a huge milestone. And, I'm going to be continuing talking about all sorts of games, and in addition to the usual JRPG and Japanese coverage. And I just want to thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a blast being on your podcast, and I can't wait for the next time.
Alex, it feels like another episode where we could keep going on for an hour. And I felt like that with the Tales of Arise episode, that there were still so many other things we could talk about, but even more so with this one, that, we've got more notes to discuss. I know our notes aren't exhaustive. We weren't able to get to everything, but yeah, this was a ton of fun. Always great to have you on. We'll definitely do it again soon. David, what's going on with you? I know you're obviously playing Elden Ring right now. Thirsty Mage stuff. Any updates there? Content coming? What's happening?
Yeah, I don't know what games. I know we got a bunch of games coming out. It's kind of that time of the year where games aren't necessarily launching, but you're getting ready for others. Like the summer, we got so many, with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 being switched to July. We got that, and then we also got Soul Hackers in August. So I'm kind of taking this time to kind of go back. Like it was kind of the perfect time for me for Elden Ring, because I was able to starting to go back to some older games. I know we've got a couple of reviews on lately. Man, I don't even remember what the games were. It feels like it's been so long.
Yeah.
Every time I play a game, it feels like it was like 3 months ago I played it. But yeah, I know the Thirsty Mage. I've been working on a new. So it's still thirstymage.com, but I was able to figure out how themes work and all these other neat things on WordPress. So thirstymage.com it has gotten a facelift, I guess would be the best way to put it. So there's a new look to it. So you can check out there for any recent reviews and that sort of thing. I joked about the Mastodon, but I actually did create a Mastodon account. So it's Thirsty Mage at mastodon.social. And because it's not so much because the car guy is buying Twitter. I think that was more like the cherry on top of the sundae of crap that Twitter's become over the past few years. And I'm not completely abandoning Twitter, but I actually joked today in a tweet that to me, Mastodon feels like a place where you can go and have a beer with friends and talk to them, and Twitter is like a rock concert with everyone you know. And the band is trying to sell you NFTs and stupid ape pictures. So it's just a different experience. So it's kind of, to me, it's like, maybe I'll just try to spend more time over on this other one. So if there's anyone out there and we still have our Discord too, which is great. So it gives that same experience. So you can catch us on those on those platforms as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, I haven't been working on a ton of reviews lately. It does feel like a little bit of a lull time before things ramp up, I should say, in the summer. June and July obviously going to be pretty stacked. I'm sure we're going to start getting announcements as we get closer to June as well. But May feels, at least right now, feels like it could be a little bit lighter. So perfect time to work on your backlog or battle with your backlog as it will, or as you were. And I'm still making my way through Chrono Cross. I'm getting close to the end. I think I might be in the final third or final quarter of the game. So I'm going to share some thoughts on that. I will still be on Twitter at Riskman64, so you can follow me there for thoughts on Chrono Cross and some other games I'm going to be picking up soon. I know that I think it's Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, that action RPG, which is kind of a prequel to the game that's, I guess, a spiritual successor to Suikoden 2. So that I'm probably going to play that in May as well. So got that coming up. But
is that coming out already?
So the prequel is the action RPG prequel, which I think might have been
okay,
the Kickstarter.
So
yes,
I know what you're saying.
Not the full game. I think the full game is next year.
Game.
Yeah, full game is next year with 100 plus characters or something like that.
I was just about to. I know. Almost had a heart attack there thinking that other game was coming out because it looks like it's going to be pretty.
We'll almost have to do a Suikoden 2 episode before we get to that one so that we can have the very natural comparison. I think that'd be fun.
I definitely own that game on at least one platform, probably 3.
Just let me play it when the new PlayStation Plus Premium comes out, okay? Just move it over there so I can play it on my PS5. But yeah, I think that'll do it for today. So thanks everybody for listening to our Elden Ring kind of deeper dive spoiler cast type show with Alex from Backlog Battle. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. We'll definitely do it again soon. And then, please check out Alex's recent video. Is kind of video essay, 30-minute long on Elden Ring. It's a really fun video. The video editing is really good. I had a blast watching it last night. But yeah, I think that'll do it for tonight. So thanks everybody for listening to us. Hope you have a great week ahead, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.